You know what? They never tell you. That destruction can, the kind where someone looks you in the eyes, calls you their everything, and then systematically dismantles every part of you just to see what happens. They cradled you like something sacred, spoke your name like it was a hymn, made promises that sounded like prophecy, and then they let go. Not by accident. No, accidents are forgivable. They opened their hands and watched you fall, leaned in close, just to hear the impact. They didn't merely break you, they dissected your breaking. They wanted data, they wanted to know your breaking point, to map the fault lines of your trust, to catalog exactly how much pressure it took before you collapsed. And when you finally did, when you crumbled under the weight of their indifference, they had the audacity to look shocked, like they hadn't been the architect of your destruction, like their fingerprints weren't all over the weapon, like they didn't know their own hands were the ones that built the cage, locked you inside, and then set it on fire. Here's where they got it wrong. They thought destruction was permanent. They believed that if they broke you down far enough, you'd stay down, that you'd spend the rest of your life on your knees, gathering fragments, begging them to help you reassemble into something they might want again. They imagined you small, diminished, forever reaching back toward them with trembling hands. But here is what they never understood about breaking. It is not always an ending. Sometimes it is alchemy. Glass doesn't just shatter. It transforms. Under enough pressure, it becomes something new entirely. And you didn't stay broken. You didn't stay on the floor. You became the edge they never anticipated. Every wound they gave you sharpened into a blade they'll never be brave enough to touch again. They named it heartbreak, like it was romance, like it was some beautiful tragedy they could frame in metaphor and call it poetry. But there is nothing beautiful about heartbreak. It is grotesque. It is waking up at 3 a.m. with your chest caving in, convinced you are dying. It is staring at the ceiling until sunrise, trying to reconcile how someone who swore they couldn't live without you managed to go on living the moment you weren't useful anymore. It is the sick realization that the person who promised to protect you was actually the threat. That is not heartbreak. That is assassination. That is betrayal. And betrayal doesn't just wound you, it reconstructs you. It takes your softness and forges it into something unbreakable. It turns your vulnerability into armor. It transforms your hope into strategy. They thought they were holding up a mirror, showing you every flaw, every inadequacy, every way you failed to meet their impossible standards. They thought they were teaching you about your deficiencies. But here is the truth they'll spend years running from. You were the mirror, and now, every time they face themselves, all they see is the criminal staring back. Every time they look at their own reflection, they see the evidence of what they destroyed. That is not your revenge. That is simply cause and effect. That is just the universe showing them the receipt. You used to be soft, pliable as clay, willing to take whatever shape they needed, willing to mold yourself into something they could love, even if it meant becoming unrecognizable to yourself. But clay exposed to fire doesn't stay soft. It hardens. It becomes permanent. That is you now. They tried to shape you into something convenient, something they could use when they needed and store away when they didn't. But fire changes everything, and you are not clay anymore. You are the blade they forged from their own cruelty, the weapon they created from their own neglect. They'll return. They always do. Not because they've changed, not because they've grown, not because they suddenly understand what they lost. They'll come back because they miss what you provided, the validation, the unwavering loyalty, the way you made them feel significant, without ever requiring them to reciprocate, the way you loved them more than they ever loved themselves. But here is what they'll discover. The version of you they're searching for is gone. She died in the fire, they said. What remains is something they won't recognize. Something that doesn't beg for breadcrumbs, doesn't draft explanations for their bad behavior, and absolutely doesn't forgive. Without fundamental transformation, they called you cold. Weaponized the word like an accusation. But cold isn't fragility. Cold is sovereignty. Cold is the stillness before the avalanche, the quiet before the thunder. The calm before the storm obliterates everything in its path. They wanted you warm, malleable, easy to manipulate, easy to wound, easy to control. But warmth doesn't conquer, ice does. Winter doesn't negotiate, and you are the glacier they never saw coming. The force of nature they mistook for something they could contain. Here is the mathematics of pain. Suffering isn't just something you endure, it is something you transform into power. Every night, you cried yourself unconscious. That was fuel being stored. Every morning you dragged yourself out of bed with your heart shattered. That was training. That was you learning exactly how much you could withstand, exactly how much strength you possess, exactly how much punishment you can absorb and still rise. They thought they were destroying you. But what they actually did was reveal your capacity. They showed you that you could survive what was meant to kill you. And once you know that, once you understand your own indestructibility, you become dangerous. They'll attempt to rewrite history. They'll construct narratives about how you changed, how you became someone they don't recognize, how you turned cold and distant and cruel. But we both know the objective truth. They changed you. They took your trust, that precious, rare thing, and shattered it for sport. They took your love, that infinite resource you offered freely, and squandered it. They took your loyalty, that unshakable foundation, and used it to build their own pedestal before kicking it out from under you. And now they stand in the ruins they created, bewildered about why existence feels so hollow without you in it.